Welcome to Politics Nation. I'm Al Sharpton. Tonight's lead, historic day. For the next hour, we'll cover all parts of the Supreme Court's momentous decision to uphold President Obama's health care law, a law that will improve the lives of millions of Americans. We'll look how it will affect the presidential election. We'll look at the surprising vote to preserve the law, a vote by Bush-appointed Chief Justice John Roberts. And we'll talk about presidents who have for 100 years tried to bring health care to all Americans. Now, Barack Obama has done it. We'll speak to two members of Congress in just a moment for their reaction. But I want to begin with what happened inside the Supreme Court today. Joining me now is Jeffrey Rosen, law professor at George Washington University and legal affairs editor of The New Republic, and Ian Millhiser from the Center for American Progress. He was inside the courtroom today. First of all, thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, let me start with you, Jeff Rosen. The Chief Justice said the law's individual mandate was constitutional. He wrote, quote, "The law's requirement that individuals pay a penalty for not obtaining health insurance may reasonably be characterized as a tax. Because the Constitution permits such a tax, it is not our role to forbid it." Was that the sentence that saved the health care law?
That is absolutely the sentence that saved the health care law. Lots of people have been focusing on a different provision of the Constitution. Did Congress have the power to regulate interstate commerce broadly enough that would justify the mandate? But in the end, Chief Justice Roberts, casting a historic, tie-breaking vote with the liberal justices, said that although he did not think it could be justified under Congress's commerce power, it could be justified under Congress's clear power to tax. And that was the crucial decision that let him to side with the liberals.
Now, so we're very clear. The arguments and the forecast was around the commerce law. And I know for a fact that a lot of civil rights legislation was based on commerce, interstate commerce. Roberts and the court did not find it under commerce. In fact, there was questions on that, which could be troubling on other cases, but we'll leave that for a moment. But he found it constitutional based on the law in terms of interfering with taxing. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. The Constitution explicitly gives Congress the power to pass taxes. Of course, there was a big debate during the health care debate in Congress. Was this or wasn't it a tax? Initially, all the Democrats said it's not a tax, and the Republicans said it is. Then as soon as the thing was challenged in court, they rushed to the courtroom and switched positions, and all the Republicans said, Obama's raising your taxes. And the Democrats said it could be justified under the taxing power. But Roberts swept through all of those shifting positions and said, as a constitutional matter, we are convinced that this looks like a tax in every respect, and therefore it can be upheld.
Now, Ian, this was stunning that the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who is a Bush appointee, actually voted with the four considered liberals of the court. What was it like? You were actually in the chambers. Could you share with us what was it like, the body language? Was there any kind of visible signs before and during the reading of the court's decision that you could share with us? You were actually there.
Yeah, the most striking thing to me, when the justices walk into the courtroom, normally there's this ritual where they all walk in and they all stand behind their chairs and they look out over the gathered audience for a while and then they all sit down together. And 8 of the justices did that today. But Justice Scalia, the same Justice Scalia who's been including all these gratuitous swipes at President Obama in his immigration opinion, who was breaking out all these partisan rhetoric during the Affordable Care Act oral arguments, Justice Scalia had his hands on the bench and he was looking down like his son had just told him that he'd wrecked the car. And that was the moment when I was pretty sure that we just won this thing.
He was looking down like his son had just told him he wrecked the car.
He looked like he was despairing.
You're not implying that John Roberts had kind of wrecked his hopes of overturning health care, are you?
Well, I mean, Justice Scalia has shown a great deal of partisanship throughout all this. I mean, it's clear that he's been very, not just intellectually invested, but emotionally invested in wanting to see conservative policy outcomes come about. And, yeah, I think he looked physically depressed today when he walked into that courtroom.
How stunning was it, and how stunned did people in the court, in the chamber where you sat, how stunned were they when the Chief Justice actually shifted gears and said, but as of dealing with this from a tax law point of view, it is not our role to forbid it, and people began to realize that he had actually voted with the 4 members of the court that people often, I included, would never think he would vote with.
You know, it's funny. I was sitting a few seats away from a gentleman I sometimes debate from a conservative think tank. And when the Chief Justice started reading, he was reading the parts about how it cannot be upheld under the Commerce Clause and things like that. I was slumping lower and lower in my chair, and my friend was getting higher and higher in his. And then he got to that part, and we switched posture. So, I mean, there was a definite palpable effect. And I want to say, you know, let's be careful here not to let the Chief Justice off the hook. You know, he did the right thing here in what should have been an easy case, but this is still the same Chief Justice who was in cases like Citizens United and the Ledbetter equal pay case. So this is not a good Chief Justice, even though he voted in what should have been a very easy case.
We are going to talk a lot about him later in the show, and we are not going to let him on or off the hook. We'll let people decide that on all the information. Let me go back to you for a minute, though, Jeff. The Chief Justice ruling, why he tried to find a way to declare law constitutional. He writes, court must have, quote, a general reticence to invalidate the acts of the nation's elected leaders. He also writes, when a court confronts an unconstitutional statute, its endeavor must be to conserve, not destroy, the legislation. Now, that doesn't sound too partisan to me.
It's not too partisan, and this is exactly what he said he would do in his confirmation hearings and when he first took office. He said he thought it was bad for the court and bad for the country when the justices handed down 5-4 decisions that split along party lines. He said the court should generally stay out of the political process and leave the decisions up to elected officials. He said he would make it his mission as Chief Justice to encourage bipartisan decisions that avoided the kind of partisanship that Justice Scalia was showing. And, you know, as you've been discussing, he's had mixed success in that in cases like Citizens United and affirmative action, which we'll talk more about later. But I do think he gets a lot of credit in this, the most important, most defining decision of his career, for coming up with a solution that, although it didn't make either side entirely happy, brought the court back from the abyss, did not directly confront President Obama, upheld the centerpiece of his domestic agenda. Here, this is the good Roberts really recognizing that the role of a Chief Justice is different than that of an ordinary Associate Justice. He is responsible for the bipartisan legitimacy of the court as a whole, and today he really tried to shore that up.
All right, now let's bring in Congressman Chaka Fattah, Democrat from Pennsylvania, and Congressman Jim McDermott, Democrat from Washington. Congressman Fattah, let's start with you. Your reaction to this decision by the Supreme Court?
Well, I think it's just extraordinary that what you had as a president and an attorney general that crafted a legal strategy that was criticized, if you go back to the oral arguments, by everyone on all sides, that it was fatally deficient. And here we have a ruling today that, as you've indicated, is going to provide health care to tens of millions of people. We have an accomplishment, an achievement that's 100 years in the making. We really have a presidency that's been transformational, and I want to commend the president. I also want to commend Eric Holder for putting a legal team together and a legal strategy to present to this court and to take Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, on his word about how he would rule on these matters. And they made an argument that a lot of people didn't pay attention to, but they made this argument that if you didn't find it acceptable under the Commerce Clause and under the Necessary Clause, that you could, on this basis, rule in favor of moving America forward, and that's what the Chief Justice did.
Now, Congressman McDermott, almost immediately after the court ruling, your Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle started saying, we're going to repeal it. We're going after it to repeal it. Watch this.
I will act to repeal Obamacare.
There's only one way to truly fix Obamacare. Only one way. And that's a full repeal.
I've scheduled a vote for total repeal of the Obamacare bill to occur on Wednesday, July 11th.
Today's ruling underscores the urgency of repealing this harmful law.
Can they do it, Congressman McDermott? Do they have the votes to repeal this law?
Well, they have the votes to get it out of the House, Al, but it'll never get out of the Senate. These guys can't accept they've lost the ballgame. They spent all their efforts on undermining the president's effort with health care. And they were hanging their hat that they were going to win the election in 2012 by doing in the president's plan. And the court, led by John Roberts, I mean, there's an irony here of a right-wing judge coming out and putting his blessing on Obama's plan. That was the icing on the cake, and they are so mad. They're like a team that's lost a game, and they go down in the dugout and they start kicking the bat rack and throwing the water cooler around. They simply are going to try. In fact, they've told us it's on the 11th of July. They're going to come to the floor with a repeal, and they'll get it out of the House, and it'll quietly die in the Senate.
There's no president that's going to sign a repeal that's over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Barack Obama's not going to repeal this. But, you know, in our church, they say the Lord works in mysterious ways. I think that Chief Justice Roberts really has positioned this argument in a way in which it'll be difficult for any of this to be undone going forward.
It's interesting, Congressman. You and I must have went to similar churches. Congressman Chaka Fattah, Congressman Jim McDermott, Jeffrey Rosen, and Ian Millhiser, thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ahead, Mitt Romney's vowing to repeal the law he helped to create. What does it mean for the election? And Democrats walk out as the GOP-led House votes to hold Eric Holder, the Attorney General, in contempt of Congress.
We are here in this courtyard to say to our Republican colleagues, shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you.
Shame.
You're watching Politics Nation on MSNBC.